one of the great things about having an absolutely terrible memory is that I can watch episodes like Fish in a Draw as if I'm watching it for the first time. Very briefly, I used to watch 2.5 Men constantly for several years, and then I stopped watching it pretty much once the show stopped airing. And there are some episodes that I remember so well, but the ones that I remember well, I remember usually because of the comedy. I remember the jokes. I remember the things that made me laugh. Fish in a Draw is a murder mystery. I could not remember what happened, and I'm so glad of that, because it was like watching it for the first time, and it is an absolute joy. This is the 17th episode of the 5th season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Jeff Melman, and as always, there will be spoilers, big spoilers, as I'll be explaining what happens as I go through the episode from now and share some thoughts. And this one picks up pretty much where the last episode left off. Evelyn and Teddy got married at Charlie's house, and immediately it's dramatic. We have a very brief flashback to the butterflies, and then Jake drops a strawberry onto his white shirt, and the camera zooms in as if it's looking at all the blood particles. This is a CSI parody. It's also the first time I'm watching this episode since watching CSI. So that's kind of cool for me. And very clearly, this was going to be a very dramatic, very different episode. Even the theme song is CSI-fied, which I thought was a nice touch. And Charlie and Courtney decide to go up to the bedroom and have sex, of course. And they're in the dark, fumbling around, and they feel something. And it's Teddy on the bed with his trousers pretty much down his ankles. And he's dead. Downstairs, Evelyn is singing, and then she learns that he is dead and with his trousers down his ankles, and as she later explains, with lipstick on his hoo-hoo. So clearly he's been up to something with somebody, but who and how did he die? And the cops arrive and they check for semen in the room. They turn on the little light, and obviously this is Charlie's bedroom. So it's basically painted on everywhere, which is a terrible thought. And then we have this series of interviews or interrogations with different people. The only person who seemed to give a pretty straightforward interrogation, well, interview, it wasn't so much of an interrogation with Alan, was Alan, because he just didn't really have any motive. There was nothing on him, whereas Evelyn was acting suspicious. Jake wasn't necessarily acting suspicious, but it didn't exactly go very smoothly. He kept talking about food, and I rather enjoyed the pacing of those, the time we spent on each of them. Evelyn suggested that there was lipstick on his hoo-hoo because it might have been clowns, and we get an image of that. The editing for this is brilliant. Very CSI. Again, this is the first time watching it since watching CSI, so the editing might have seemed a little bit strange to me the first time I watched this. I have no recollection, as I said, of watching this one, really. But the editing is a lot of fun. The editing in CSI is absolutely brilliant. And then we find out, after a series of interviews and interrogations and finding the motive, I have to say it didn't look good for Evelyn. She had a lot of reasons to want to kill her husband. Then we do find out, and this is the bit where I was genuinely surprised, and if anybody had worked this out, I would be very shocked. Maybe it's not impossible, maybe somebody came to this conclusion, but I didn't, and that's with me having seen the episode before. We find out that the lipstick on his hoo-hoo is Courtney's. It was a match for Courtney's, and we find out that it is hers. They're not even related. They're con artists committing marital fraud. And of course the big question is, well, that doesn't make any sense with all of the things we've seen. But then we see a few brief flashbacks, such as them arguing outside the house when actually they were shouting but making out, and when Teddy was watching Charlie stalking Courtney, he was previously in her house doing things with her, and it was very well done, and I didn't see it coming, despite the fact I'd seen it before. It was just incredible. And usually I don't like twists that are far too over the top and ridiculous, but there were enough puzzle pieces that it made sense. For example, Charlie said, I practically had to force Courtney to take my $50,000. Well, that's part of the fraud. So it was an incredible way to take things. And she didn't kill him. His heart just gave out. So I guess there's been no murder, but a lot of other crimes. Well, one main crime of marital fraud. And I thought it was a very powerful episode, very fun. I'd love to know how this came about as well, who initially had the idea for this. It's a really fun concept, great editing, wonderful narrative. Not the funniest episode, but I don't think that that's a problem. It's definitely designed to be more dramatic and mysterious than it is to be laugh out loud funny like a lot of the episodes are. But either way, I loved it. I thought Fish in a Drawer was absolutely fantastic, very dramatic, complete surprise with that twist. And I'm thankful I have a terrible memory because it was an absolute joy. Fish in a Drawer is very different and definitely a really, really fantastic episode of 2.5 Men.